All right, we'll use the mouse. Here we go. Okay, try it again. Hi everyone, I'm Barney. Nice to meet you. A couple years ago, I helped to start a non-profit called Football for Future, which is all about football and climate change. How many football fans have we got in the room? Can you put your hand up if you're a football fan? Can you now put your hands down? Can you put your hand up if you don't know anything about football? You're just here. Okay, cool, nice, great. Actually, part of football is one of the world's most popular cultural phenomenon. Over half the world's population watched the last World Cup before Qatar. Viewing figures a bit lower, probably because of all the human rights stuff. But the whole kind of mission when we started was about using football as a way to communicate climate change. Too often we think about it as polar bears or the planet or green grass and whatever. And it was about how can we utilize something as amazing as football to be able to communicate on climate. And actually then part of what we do is about, well, getting more people into football because of the message that we have about trying to teach about climate change. So we're here today on World Wildlife Day. Like I said earlier, a couple of years ago, you think about World Wildlife Day, you think about the WWF or pandas or polar bears or whatever, and it's all way too it's kind of very much environmental stereotypes. And there's this great campaign that the WWF started doing with all these different football clubs and more called World Without Nature. You can go on Twitter and look it up. It's all happening today, and all these different football clubs taking part, us as well, and more. And yeah, it's been going a couple of years now. It's a good example of climate communication in a good way. So, okay, what has climate change got to do with any of this? Like I say, I've always been a Spurs fan. I learnt about climate change, or rather even just global warming, when I was in like year 8. I must have been 8 years old or something like that. And it's just, the point is that we've known about this issue for a long time. It still struggles me. I struggle to understand now why it's taken so long to act, even though like it was even in the curriculum when I was 8. I'm 26 now. And yeah, 2015 in Paris was like held as a really big moment at the time. That was massive news, but there wasn't really ever much. Didn't really feel like there was public criticism about it. At least there might have been in different circles, but not in the public eye, like perhaps there was in 2018 when there were the Extinction Rebellion protests shutting down London. And yeah, I think that really broke the echo chamber in lots of different ways. A pink boat in Oxford Circus, that's pretty crazy. And yeah, you can see that actually in the opinion polls and what happened to the environment as a voting priority at the 2019 general election. So yeah, you can also see the little, I'm no expert, but I think that little jump around 2015 is also the Paris agreement, this one here. So yeah, you can see it was already coming up, but XR really pushed it in a big way. But all of these are still very much focused on these like general principles. I mean, this is just today. I just Googled climate change and okay, hot weather, polar bears, the Earth, like really stereotypical images about the environment and climate change. And for me, I think now I've worked on this a couple of years. It's all about what we now need is a cultural revolution in climate communication. And we should be thinking about it across all the wonderful cultural things that humanity has to offer and that we care about, whether it's literature or film. And this is already starting to happen with sport more generally. This is so the Winter Olympics, they used 100% fake snow, and starting to be criticism now about fossil fuel sponsorship there. This is literally from yesterday. Brian Eno set up a charity called Earth Percent and has had a load of artists agree they're going to name the Earth as a co-collaborator. A bit eco-y, but still pretty good. And yeah, this is gaming as well. The UN have started doing this too. It's all very, big though, isn't it? Brian Eno and the UN. A couple of years ago, I met a guy called Elliot, and yeah, he was doing. He went to a protest with a Brighton shirt on, Brighton Vans for Climate Justice, and yeah, a couple of years later, we're now we're part of Football for Future, which is a non-profit, like I said, the kick out of environmental sustainability. We do lots of different things. We do education primarily for lots of different groups. So whether it's young people here, this is all part of our very first project. When we just started, it was literally just a brand and a name. Oh, no. Literally was just this. And we're like, we're just football fans. We care about the environment. What do you want to do? I don't know. And the first project we had was with Nike, which was massive. And yeah, we did like workshops for young people at Chelsea and Spurs through their foundations. And yes, so we do educational workshops for young people. We also did them for club staff. That's Wolves there on the left and West Ham Foundation on the right. We've done quite a few others since. So getting them involved. And for players too, we work with players and support them to use their voice and speak out. I don't have Mason Mount's number. And oh yeah, sorry, I missed a little bit. And yeah, the other side of our work then is about sustainability strategies. So we support clubs to measure their environmental footprint. I'll talk more about this later, and then improve on it with a strategy. So education and strategies, two things we do. And all of this then is really grounded in, like I said at the start, okay, let's meet football fans at face level, like me as a Spurs season ticket holder, about climate change. And but you need to have a good weight behind you with that. And for us, there's a comprehensive description of the relationship between football and climate change. And I can talk more about this if anyone wants to know, but we've got it really well in this film, which we did. I'll have to remember the password, which I do. I definitely do. So hopefully that kind of scratches some of the surface. The problem with that film is it showcases Brighton and Bruno as our Lord and Saviour. there's lots still going wrong in football. But yeah, the main part of that film obviously talks about how, if you look to the future, a quarter of professional clubs in England are at risk of being flooded due to sea level rise. But you don't have to look that far ahead. I mean, last summer, whether it was when England was like hotter than 98% of the rest of the world. Of course, like if you turn on mainstream news, it's all about heat waves, etc. But there was a real life impact in the world of football. The Lionesses had to move their training session indoors just before their quarter final against Spain. Was it semi-final? Can't remember. Or whether it's non-league pitches getting dried out. I mean, even my local pitch where I play on Saturdays in Brighton and Preston Park, I couldn't play football for a couple of weeks because or whether it's flooding affecting places like Tadcaster right now. I mean, there are several clubs in the north of England that I just, I mean, when we went up to Tadcaster, their clubhouse is just like completely damp and falling apart. And, places like Tadcaster as well are relatively isolated, and football clubs represent an important place for them. So yeah, you don't have to look that far ahead. You can see how it's already happening, generally through extreme weather events. But then it's also what we try to do in that second part of the film, where Bruno's walking around, is showing how football contributes. So it's estimated that football has a carbon footprint the size of Tunisia or Denmark, roughly, maybe Spain or Poland if you're looking at the whole global sports industry. And 70% of that generally comes from fan travel. So thinking about how fans get to a stadium, and that's when you want to think about how football contributes, it's through generally the idea of a match day experience. You go to a game, what transport options available, you go inside, even just tickets or anything like that. So that's kind of the relationship between football and climate, which we tried to put on film there. Yeah, and like I said, again, it kind of showcases Brighton and Bruno's doing enough. I mean, poor Bruno. But yeah, there's so many other big problems that are happening in football right now, whether it's short haul flights, even just this last week, where Ten Hag flew back from London to Manchester. I think they had a game on the Tuesday or something, a midweek game. And I mean, this is so endemic in the Prem and in football everywhere. It's whether it's Liverpool flying back on a 30-minute flight from Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, or Nottingham Forest flying to Blackpool. They got singled out quite badly, but this happens all the time. And yeah, the Prem clubs will say it's performance, etc. But it's a problem. And then of course how fossil fuels are involved in the football industry as well. Whether it's this is actually something by The Athletic. It said that the 25 largest fossil fuel companies in the world, out of those 25, 16 have been actively involved in the sponsorship or ownership of football clubs and competitions within the past 2 years, including 8 of the largest 10 in the world. And there's some familiar names up there that you might just know generally, like BP or Shell, but then Gazprom in the Champions League. Manchester United as well had a partnership with Aeroflot, and both of those were dropped when the whole situation in Ukraine broke out, but it wasn't for climate reasons. And then even beyond this, whether it's INEOS, so Jim Ratcliffe's firm, petrochemicals, oil and gas trying to buy United at the moment, or whether it's Qatar trying to buy United, this is it's an endemic problem in the sector. And unfortunately, through this, it's non-league clubs that are and women's football as well that are the worst affected. This is just from in January. There was a really cold spell. You'll remember now. Of course, listen, we're in the UK. It's January. It gets cold, but loads of games cancelled. We found over 60, including right at the top of the WSL. And if anything, although like I say, it's January and cold weather is expected, the frequency, climate change has been shown to increase the frequency of these events. And it also just showcases how vulnerable football is to climate change. Again, like I mentioned earlier, with extreme weather events. That one on the right is from 2016, off the top of my head. Carlisle with Storm Desmond. Their chairman is now like a massive climate advocate, and they estimate they had £3 million in damage from that. Their whole concourse was screwed, everything. And I think 2 years later, it happened all over again. So it's an ongoing problem for them. This is just some of the research we did, again showing, how home clubs are least affected, and even just a couple of games in the WSL cancelled. It's all at the lower league, and again, we don't even have any data to showcase how people like me playing football on a Saturday are affected. And okay, if I can't play on a Saturday, I think it's actually the next slide a little bit. Yeah, this is when you think a bit bigger now. I've worked in this. When you think about if I can't play on a Saturday, okay, what does that then do for my health or my mental health? And then if I've got to pay to play somewhere, what happens then? What you then introducing barriers into football. Very similar conversations we have about climate and barriers that might be introduced over time, but we're then seeing it in English football potentially here in the UK. And I mean, even then, on that topic of maybe I've got to pay to play somewhere, maybe I pay to play on a pitch with microplastics in it. The EU are looking at banning these at the moment, and it's probably going to happen in the UK too. Where is the money going to come from to replace these pitches? And then it can be quite complicated thinking about climate as well, and the pros and cons of everything. This picture on just some other things that have come into my head recently. This was from last summer with the heat waves, and the FSA did a bit of a campaign on this. There's a rule: if you go into a football stadium, if you've got a bottle of water, generally you should take the lid off. So then loads of stadiums fans going to stadiums and getting dehydrated, etc. And of course, everything I'm talking about here, you can apply to all different sports. Maybe you're not a football fan, maybe you're a tennis fan or whatever. This is all very applicable, even how I spoke about how football contributes to climate change, the idea of going to a stadium, how do you get there? This is very similar with big gigs, and all this kind of thing. There's lots of now you start to work in football and climate. You guys might be here today and thinking, wow, football and climate, a quarter club studied, but we are only scratching the surface here. And when I talk about that, how we still have that top level understanding of climate as the Earth or polar bears or whatever, there's a long way to go to understand how everything's going to be affected. It's been quite difficult for me because I kind of, like I say, I've only had a experience at school with climate change, and I was very aware of what XR were doing, but I kind of was like, oh, listen to the scientists. But now I'm working like football in this, I've had to wake up to what's going on by listening to this explicit niche relationship, what is seen as niche now, but is picking up speed. So what needs to happen? Okay, well, this is kind of, again, very transferable across loads of different sectors. Clubs should be measuring their environmental footprint. Okay, well, let's say footprint. It's not just a carbon footprint; it's your environmental footprint, because it's not just carbon either. It's you've got to think. It's better to think of it as environmental sustainability. What about nature or waste, etc.? And this is actually such an endemic problem, I feel, in the sports sector that. And the UN have had this for a while, the United Nations Sport for Climate Action Framework. And it is now you sign up and you have to go half your emissions by 2035 and 100% by 2040. It might be 2030, that 50% figure. And lots of clubs have signed up, which is excellent. Arsenal and the Premier League have signed up. I think the FA has signed up. But yeah, it's all just about carbon. So now the UN have started another Sports for Nature framework that then all the new clubs have got to sign up to, etc. So there's when we think about climate, we have to think about we can't just think about carbon. We've got to think a bit more broadly than that as well. And clubs should be measuring their footprints across all of that as well. And just a bit more on the nature thing as well. You know, think about training grounds. Yeah, you know, clubs have how clubs affect carbon. I've mentioned like through travel emissions, but how do clubs affect nature? Okay, through their training grounds, and you know they have like massive stadiums in an area. There's a lot of ways that impacts biodiversity. And yeah, once you measure your boot print, then you should be having a strategy to improve upon it. And yeah, of course, sustainability strategies are like the new hot thing now. But the crucial thing with football or music or any other cultural sector is that, like I said, football's unique because of its cultural influence. Yeah, half the world's population are football fans, or they watch the 2016 or whatever it was, 2018 World Cup final. So football needs to be communicating about this in a really public way, and that's how the sector's changed as well. That's kind of what we tried to do a little bit. When I was working on this a couple of years ago, some conferences you go to, it feels like a paper conference. You know, like I'm working in football. Do you know what I mean? A good example of this, we did some work with Wolves. That was Southampton's strategy on the right, which is cool, and we did this one with Wolves, and this is just a good example of how like it can all activate in a public way.
Green armbands to mark the Green Football Weekend.
No, this is perfect, by the way, but it's something
against climate change and the need to be more sustainable.
And anyway, that's an example of how this can all come together in a public way on a match day. Yeah, you know, football clubs have a kind of responsibility to act on this. No, we won't play that again. Okay, let's go down here.
Players and running.
There we go. So yeah, that's roughly what needs to happen: a measurement of your boot print and then a strategy to improve on it. So what opportunities are there coming up to make this change? What do we need to keep an eye on? Well, the FA currently only have a sustainability strategy related to procurement, buying goods into Wembley. So it's about, you know, getting food in and that kind of thing. It's pretty poor. But they do say that they've got a new strategy en route, although both, I mean, so do the Prem, but they both keep saying it's coming in like the coming weeks, and then it never comes. But it's going to be interesting to see what they look like. And like I say, they've almost shot themselves a little bit in their foot by being so slow, because now conversations around sponsorship and ownership and fossil fuels are picking up. Conversations about short haul flights are picking up. I mean, has anyone kind of like heard about those things within football at all? Like maybe put your hand up if you've heard about those things. Yeah. Okay. I trust me. 6 months ago, that would not have been the case. Things are happening really quickly now in this sector, and I think within another 6 or 12 months, there's going to be very serious conversations like we have about the British Museum and Shell about that within football as well. Football is community clubs, community assets, etc. And looking a bit further ahead, there's probably going to be quite soon, you know, the conversation around kickoff times being set by broadcasters at times that then aren't good with public transport and all this kind of thing. All of this is coming, and yeah, it feels exciting to be kind of at the forefront of it and working on it, and yeah, letting you guys know all about it as well. So those strategies are they're going to be exciting. Let's see what they look like, etc. And there probably will be. I know the Prem are being. There's the conversation around short haul flights is all kind of like, well, are the Prem going to regulate about this? And then there are conversations. If they don't, we also exist in a period where there's conversation of a regulator coming into football as well. And this is as a result of something that's been brewing for a few years now. There was a fan-led review into football as that was a Conservative government manifesto pledge, whatever you call it, and that's happened now. Now we've got the regulator coming in, and so when they first did the review into exploring whether this would be a thing, they spoke all about the goal of the review was to ensure the long-term sustainability of English football, but there wasn't a single mention to environmental sustainability or climate change at all, which is just, come on. So yeah, we did some work on this with Forest Green Rovers, who are widely known as the World's Greenest Club, and others, etc., on this, which was good. But yeah, there's work to do on that, and part of what the government are now coming out with is this regulator. And there's talk as well about owners and directors tests. What's going to happen? How are owners and directors of football clubs going to be deemed fit and proper, and all this kind of thing. And when you add in the fossil fuel element, let's not also forget there's an election coming next year. Football is a massive, great big political football. So we live in an exciting time for this, and I don't know what's going to happen so quickly within a year or two. So that's the fan-led review. What's next? There's also a review happening into the future of women's football as well, which of course is probably one of football's best assets right now. Certainly in England with the WSL, a really, really high potential thing from a commercial perspective, which is how a lot of clubs think. We submitted some evidence into the review as it happened, really focused on a few points. If I wrote them down. But anyway, this is how. I just pause that. No, can't do that. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, women's football is also at risk from climate change, and I showed you as well that graph with WSL games being cancelled, and one of them was Chelsea v Liverpool. It's a few weeks ago. It was a frozen pitch, and the players went to go play out on this pitch as well, and they're just slipping everywhere. Quite another example of just how football's affected. Whoops, the music on this was really bad. I mean, this is pro football. 5 minutes. You see that? 5.5 minutes. What a joke. A poor Liverpool fans that came down that day. So yeah, women's football was affected too, and just specifically on that, how it is affected. Again, this is another example of the conversation, like different things you think about. The women's game is obviously about to grow really quickly, and if you go to a women's game, there's quite good vibes, I say, like a nice culture around it. And part of the focus of the review is how do we ensure that it grows with that kind of culture, and that as part we can maintain that culture. And environmental sustainability is kind of part of that as well. How do we ensure the women's game grows in an environmentally sustainable way? And then you can also think about, well, just how women's football can be affected from an infrastructure perspective. Broadmeadow here doesn't have undersoil heating, which is what Emma Hayes complained about afterwards. And the final element too is clubs also often have sustainability strategies. Because their women's teams don't play at stadiums they own, at third-party stadiums, the women's team they often get included in like their carbon footprint. So kind of they just fall out of the way. It's and this kind of thing is endemic everywhere. It's like I say, it's the conversation how we need to move on and raise awareness and etc. So how can you help? Wow, you want to get involved? Well, I think there's lots of different things about just what I've mentioned. Hopefully you've realised the potential of football and climate as a sector. And if you're really excited about this and you've got your own ideas, then that's excellent. There's so many different voices right now and lots of different opinions. But yeah, we are for us, we're a young team. This is it here. Literally, we started 2.5 years ago as 5 football fans who just care about the environment. We're all pretty much under 30, which is really fun, and working in football, which is not as young as you'd think. So perhaps if there's any academics in the room you're interested in researching this more, there's lots of different ways that this conversation can evolve, like I've said. We're also very happy to ever just comment on pieces or be a sounding board on things too. If you're a football fan and you're interested in doing something to engage on this, you can always just ask your club, what are you doing to tackle climate change? If you're part of a fan trust or something like that, fan trusts have like regular minuted meetings with their club where they can bring this up, and the club have got to come back. That's actually how our project with Wolves started. It was someone at the Wolves Trust who mentioned it in a meeting, and then Wolves went, shit, we're not doing anything. It's amazing that how clubs are really susceptible to this as well. They don't want to be seen to be doing bad work. And yeah, we also we're pretty much run by volunteers practically. So if anyone wants to get involved, we have lots of different things at the moment. I'm trying to get people involved to help with our policy stuff about the fan-led review, which is really exciting. We have like opportunities to write blogs for us or anything like that. And really, I'm just flexible in lots of different ways. Certainly, if you're talented. So that's football future, I think. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It took me quite a few years, but I managed to get a Wolves game